Hi, I'm John Belk, Technical Director of Dasic International. We make the Slick Gone range of dispersants, of which there's a large amount stocked in the global dispersant stockpile, one of the three major products in the global dispersant stockpile. The talk I'm about to give you, I originally gave to IOGP in April. I was asked to talk about supply chain situations in terms of resupply of dispersant. Now, this is a continuously movable situation. As you're about to see, the supply chain situation for dispersant raw materials is quite complicated. And a snapshot at any particular time will always be different. So in fact, this talk hasn't been modified much since I made it in April, but there are odd bits of red writing on these slides, and these slides refer to up-to-date information, things that have changed since last April. Now, the dispersant consists of two types of ingredient, basically. Solvents, which are just there as a carrier to make the dispersant pumpable, make sure it's stable at varying temperatures. And the active ingredients, which are known as surface active agents, or better known as surfactants. Talking about the solvent ingredients, generally these are the easier materials to get hold of. Lead times have been slow during the pandemic, but they are coming back to more normal levels. So we're seeing lead times now for 20-ton bulk deliveries of 5 to 10 days for the solvent we use in our product. I'm going to talk a lot about Corexit 9500 and the US stockpile, just to give an idea of scale, because the US stockpile of Corexit 9500 is 5,000 cubic meters. So I want to talk really about how quickly, if that 5,000 cubic meters was used up, how quickly that stock could be replenished in the event of a major spill. So that stockpile will require 2,000 tons of solvent. We're buying in 20-ton bulk deliveries at the moment. You can imagine that's a lot of bulk deliveries. That's going to take a long time. So don't run away with the idea that we can start to mobilize dispersant production within a few days. It's not going to happen. It's going to take months. Now, the other ingredients, the active ingredients, are surfactants. And this is just a basic diagram of the sort of ingredients that are involved. All dispersants contain what's known as ethoxylates, dioctyl sulfur succinate, often known as docusate, that's its pharmaceutical name, and sorbitol monoaleate. These are common materials to every dispersant meeting modern efficacy requirements. And just to show you the standard picture of a surfactant, one end, the red end is the hydrophilic portion, water-soluble portion. The tail end is the hydrophobic, oleophilic end, standard surfactant molecule. And that just shows how those diagrams of those surfactants are split up. Now, surfactants are niche products. They have very complex supply chains involving multiple stages. The ones used in dispersants tend to have significant plant biological origin. And modern sustainability drives are now starting to put pressure on the supply of these biological ingredients. And Bloomberg in March reported that shortage of cooking oil looms because biofuels are now starting to gain global appeal. That's going to have a direct impact on the hydrophobic end of those surfactant molecules. So life is not getting any easier. There's pressure on the supply chain from all sorts of possibly unexpected sources. So if we talk about sorbitol monoaleate, which is one of the key ingredients to all the three major dispersants, and we look at the largest UK manufacturer, Polint, Pollent have actually been out of the market since 2021. This is because of shortage of the hydrophobic oleic end of the surfactant molecule. That was caused by a global shortage of sorbitol. And in fact, Pollent have been saying at the early part of the year they wouldn't be able to supply anything until 2024. In fact, that's changed this month. They've finally managed to start producing. But it just gives you an idea of what can happen in the supply chain. So that was a plant-derived feedstock, oleic acid, mainly from palm oil, which is becoming under increasing pressure. In the meantime, other suppliers have been taking up the slack, fortunately, but lead times have been long. In April, they were 6 to 8 weeks. That's thankfully improved a lot. We're now on 2 weeks lead time for bulk supplies of 20 tonnes. Just to put it in perspective again, the 5,000 cubic metres of Correctic 9500 in the US would need about 250 tonnes. So it gives you an idea of how many weeks it would take to actually get that material in and start manufacture. Now, other ingredients, the ethoxylated materials in Correctic 9500 are tween 80 and tween 85. These are the trade names, corroder trade names, which are the most common source of these materials. They're made by ethoxylation of fatty acid using ethylene oxide. Ethylene oxide is a problem because it's toxic and highly explosive. So the number of plants across the globe that now can use ethylene oxide and produce these materials has gone down dramatically in the last 20 or 30 years. So as I said, Croda are the largest producers of these materials. Current maximum global capacity, this is Croda's global capacity, is about 60 tonnes a week. They say they could possibly, in ideal conditions, start to increase that capacity to 200 tonnes a week, given a few weeks' notice. But there is concern about effects on their own customers for other materials. They use these materials in cosmetics, as food additives. So there's a lot of pressure on supply. They don't want to compromise their existing customer base. What you have to understand is that dispersant is a very, very small market, which is why we're down really to maybe 2 major players, because the business from dispersant is limited unless there's a major spill. So you can never have a business plan that makes a viable dispersant-only company. It's not possible. And our current dispersant sales are pretty close to zero at the moment. So fortunately, we don't rely on dispersant for income, otherwise we would be in serious trouble. And again, talking about the 5,000 cubic metres of 9,500 in the US alone, that would take about 1,250 tonnes of tween 80 and tween 85 mixture. So again, if Croda are talking about making 60 tonnes a week globally, gives you an idea how many weeks it's going to take to produce 1,250 tonnes. We're talking about weeks to ramp up supply to replace that 5,000 tonnes of Correctic. So this is in red. There's now an update on this. Croda has now signed a 5-year deal with its major competitor, Cargill. Basically, this deal precludes Croda from selling tween 80, tween 85 into the oil industry at all, and oil dispersant manufacture is included in that. Croda will still manufacture on a toll basis for Cargill, but this is not positive for rapid supply. Croda will be making less money because they're toll manufacturing for Cargill, who will be taking a chunk of the profit. So if they're forced to ramp up production on a toll manufacturing basis, they're much less likely to be keen to do it. So I can't see that 60 tonnes a week increasing dramatically, and this is not a positive move from our point of view. And just to talk about tweenated very briefly, I haven't gone into the chemistry because I haven't actually got time to do that, but it's sorbitan trioleated thoxylate chemically. Sorbitan's made from sorbitol. We mentioned the global shortage of that recently. Sorbitol is made from glucose by an enzymatic process. Sorbitan itself then has to be esterified with a fatty acid. The fatty acid is derived from, say, palm oil, which has to be hydrolyzed to break down an ester and produce the fatty acid. The fatty acid then has to be reacted with the sorbitan. The sorbitan then has to be reacted with ethylene oxide. So you can see there's multiple stages in each one of these raw materials. So it's a complicated supply chain. Just to finish off and talk about dioctyl sulfur succinate, which is the other key ingredient in all the major dispersants. That's just a picture of the molecule in 3 dimensions. It's got 2 fatty acid chains on it, which makes it highly surface active. That's made from 2 feedstocks, maleic anhydride and 2-ethyl hexanol, and bisulfite. Maleic anhydride is made from oxidation of butane. Butane's petroleum source, there's another stage of manufacture there. The maleic anhydride, after the butane has been oxidized, that's then dehydrated to produce an anhydride. So you've got 3 stages of manufacturing there. The 2-ethyl hexanol portion is made from butyraldehyde, which is derived from propane, which is derived from propane. So you've got several stages of manufacture there. And historically, there have been issues with maleic anhydride, leading to long lead times. Our current lead time is currently 6 to 8 weeks. That hasn't changed since April for 10-ton lots. And again, to get the Correxic 9500 5,000 cubic meters, that would need about 1,000 tons of this material. So you can see that's 100 lots of 10 tons. That's going to take an awful lot of weeks to supply. Just backspace on that. And I would point out that the Macondo incident exhausted the entire global supply of sulfur succinate. It was gone, and it took a long time. It took many weeks to get back up to a normal supply situation. Yeah, you know, Correxic 9500 5,000 tons would use 10% of Europe's total annual capacity for sulfur succinate manufacturers in significant chunks. And finally, just to talk about packaging, Dave Reddington talked about the EVOH IBCs, or totes as the Americans know them. We're talking about 2 months lead time for enough IBCs to produce 5,000 cubic meters of Correxic 9500. Then there's manufacture. Dave's slide showed that we could produce 108 IBCs a day once we get ramped up. That's on the assumption we can get the labour to work 24 hours a day to do that. Quite frankly, at the moment, I think we're going to struggle. And labour shortages do continue across the globe post-pandemic. But on the plus side, we are looking at ramping up production through contract toll blending operations across the world, and that's an ongoing project for us. And finally, to conclude, I just want to leave you with a thought that, you know, there's been a thought in the industry that, dispersant manufacturers can quite happily ramp up. If there's a huge well blowout in South America, okay, the entire stockpile of dispersant might be exhausted within a few days, but the oil industry can put sufficient pressure on the dispersant industry and the supply chain going further up to start production rapidly. That, frankly, is a fantasy. It really is a fantasy. I've been talking in recent months with the raw material suppliers and surfactant suppliers about actually having contracts that would give us preference in the event of a major spill. And frankly, my conversations have been met with polite laughter. No one is prepared for this market to actually start committing to producing these materials at great speed. It's not going to happen. So ultimately, I think the industry's got to decide whether the existing stockpiles are adequate or not. They have to do their own risk assessments to make that decision. But replacing the existing dispersant stockpile is going to take months, even in ideal conditions. And finally, I'll leave you with the thought that these complex supply chains, all you need is a failure of one component in there for one of these raw materials for the dispersant manufacturer to stop. It's like a house of cards. You know, one of those cards fails, the whole house falls down. So it's not a simple picture. And that is it.
Hello, I'm Bronwyn from Oil Spill Response. I was just wondering if there was any potential alternative to the use of palm oil. Obviously, you're saying that there's like the whole house of cards thing with the kind of controversy.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk for hours on this actually, and yeah, it's a very good question. Palm oil is a key source. The shortages of palm oil mean that Croda, for example, between 83 and 85, have been at their Atlas Point plant in the US, avoiding palm oil and moving on to tallow, which is animal derived. So, you know, these feedstocks are complicated. There's a lot of switching going on in the marketplace depending on current conditions. So it's not reliant on palm oil. You know, you could use rapeseed oil, but again, there's pressure on that, especially after the Ukraine war. So, yeah, but there can be change. It's not totally reliant on palm oil.
You're banned. You've already had that question. Go ahead, Tom. Oh, I'll go that way. All right. Peter?
Thank you, Peter Taylor. I'm this meeting wearing my Osprey hat, which is industry's oil spill preparedness efforts for casting the flag sheet under the ITAC administration. The question that I was going to ask after Tim's presentation was more of a comment, but I have a question for John. The comment was where Tim talked about the product listing and approvals, etc. in the US, lost over a bit on the monitoring. For me, it works internationally. Just the US model can be adopted by other regulators around the world. So what US does of course, is the monitoring and the product listing. So we're interested in that in every respect. So the question for John is, bridging on Tim's presentation about persistence and requiring persistence testing coming into the US, are there concerns with any of the components that you've listed, like DocuSafe or DOS, for their persistence? And something more finally, like old pal Alan Lewis, RIP, he told me that the best feedstock plant derivative would be olive oil, but it's too expensive. Is that true? I registered that correctly?
I don't know why he said that.
Is that not right?
No, I wouldn't agree with that necessarily.
There we are. But the question remains about this. Yeah.
I mean, persistence, yeah, DocuSafe, dioctyl sulfur succinate. I think Exxon started to call it DocuSafe because it looked a bit, I might be wrong on that. DocuSafe is the pharmaceutical name. You know, it's taken by millions of Americans and Europeans. And,
You know why?
as a laxative. So it's not particularly toxic, but it is the most persistent ingredient in there. It does meet European detergent regulatory requirements for biodegradability, but it is definitely the most persistent and the most toxic from a marine toxicology point of view. But I think it's very, very hard. You know, if I could get away from using dioctyl sulfur succinate, I'd love to. But to meet the requirements of efficacy requirements on modern standards, I don't think they're going to do it.
Do we know from Tim and API whether that's going to be an issue? Because if you can't get past that hurdle of persistence,
if you can't get past that hurdle, you've got a real problem. You've got no choice.
The persistence piece is just
It's on the formulation.
persistence listing is just informational. It's not a threshold. It's just new to subpart J. Previously, there was no information provided, So again, it doesn't restrict you from being listed. It's just manufacturers need to provide that information.
Okay, we're gonna have to stop and move on, and this is why we have some lengthy